Hey guys, tonight we begin with one of history's most terrifying and misunderstood warriors, the Viking Berserker. You know, those foam at the mouth, axe-wielding maniacs that Hollywood loves to show us charging into battle wearing nothing but animal skins and rage. But here's the thing about berserkers that'll keep you up at night. The reality was somehow both less dramatic and infinitely more disturbing than anything you've seen on screen. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Because by the time we're done, you'll understand why becoming a berserker wasn't just about being tough or fearless. It was about fundamentally breaking something inside yourself that could never be repaired. In making of a monster, you wake up in the year 897 AD, somewhere in the fjords of western Norway. You're 12 years old, and today marks the beginning of the most brutal transformation any human society has ever devised. You don't know it yet, but you've been chosen for something that will either kill you or turn you into a weapon that terrifies even your own people. The selection process for berserkers wasn't random. You weren't picked because you were the biggest or strongest kid in your village. In fact, quite the opposite. You were chosen because something in your eyes suggested you could be broken and rebuilt into something else entirely. Maybe it was the way you reacted when the village dogs cornered that wounded fox last winter. Maybe it was how you didn't flinch when old Eric lost 3 fingers to that axe accident. The Berserker Masters, the Alfahiner, they have an eye for spotting children who can cross lines that others cannot. Your real family? They're not going to stop this. In fact, they probably volunteered you. Having a berserker in the family brings prestige, assuming you survived the process. It also brings fear, which in Viking society is often more valuable than gold. Your mother kissed your forehead this morning with tears in her eyes, not because she's sad to see you go, but because she knows there's a very real chance that the next time she sees you, you won't be her son anymore. You'll be something else wearing his face. The first thing they do is strip you of your name. From now on, you're just Whelp or Blood Pup or whatever degrading term amuses your handlers that day. They burn your clothes in front of you, along with any small possessions you might have brought. This isn't symbolic. This is practical. They're erasing every connection to your old life because where you're going, that soft child who played with wooden swords and helped his mother grind barley cannot follow. The Berserker Lodge sits high up in the mountains, deliberately isolated from normal human society. It's not a place where men live. It's where they go to stop being men entirely. The building itself is constructed from blackened timber and iron, with wolf and bear skulls mounted on every post. But those skulls aren't decorations. They're reminders of what you're expected to become. Each one represents a berserker who proved his transformation was complete by killing the animal with his bare hands. You spend your first night sleeping on stone, covered only by a thin hide that reeks of bear fat and dried blood. The cold seeps into your bones, but complaining will earn you a beating that'll leave you unconscious for hours. This is your introduction to a fundamental berserker principle. Pain is irrelevant. Comfort is weakness. The only thing that matters is the rage that will eventually consume everything you once were. The other initiates around you range in age from 10 to 16. Some have been here for months, others for years. You can tell how long someone's been here by their eyes. The newer ones still have that flicker of hope, of humanity. The older ones stare at nothing with the dead black eyes of sharks. They don't speak unless spoken to. They don't help each other. And they certainly don't show kindness to newcomers like you. Your first meal is raw elk meat, still warm from the kill, served on a wooden plank stained with decades of blood and grease. No salt, no bread, no vegetables. Just meat that you have to tear apart with your teeth and swallow while it's still bleeding. The taste makes you gag, but vomiting means going hungry for 3 days. You force it down, chunk by bloody chunk, while the masters watch with those same shark eyes. And this is just day one. You have years of this ahead of you. The diet of violence 3 months into your berserker training. Your body has already started changing in ways that would horrify your mother. The constant diet of raw meat has turned your teeth yellow and sharpened your canines. Your digestive system has adapted to process bloody flesh that would give normal people violent illness. But the physical changes are nothing compared to what's happening inside your head. You see, the berserker diet isn't just about nutrition. It's about psychological conditioning. Every meal is an act of violence that you're forced to participate in. You don't just eat meat. You're required to kill your own food with your bare hands or crude weapons. Yesterday, they gave you a rabbit and a dull knife. You had to hold that warm, trembling creature while you clumsily sawed through its throat, feeling its heartbeat fade against your palms while its blood soaked into your sleeves. The masters make you eat certain parts first: the heart, the liver, the brain. They tell you it's to absorb the animal's strength and cunning, but really is to break down your human revulsion to violence and gore. After 6 months of eating hearts that are still warm, of cracking open skulls to scoop out gray matter with your fingers, the sight of human blood barely registers as unusual. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. They don't just feed you meat. They feed you specific combinations of plants and fungi that grow in the deep forests. Fly agaric mushrooms, henbane, deadly nightshade, substances that would kill an ordinary person, but which berserkers consume in carefully measured doses to achieve altered states of consciousness. The dosages are based on centuries of trial and error, written in blood and madness. The mushrooms are the worst part. They don't just make you hallucinate. They make you feel disconnected from your own body, like you're watching yourself from a distance while someone else controls your actions. Your first time, you spend 3 hours convinced that your hands belong to someone else, that the screaming you hear is coming from another person entirely. The masters watch you with clinical interest, taking notes on how you react, adjusting future doses based on your responses. You learn to prepare these substances yourself, grinding dried mushrooms into powder, boiling roots into bitter teas that burn going down and leave you twitching for hours afterward. This knowledge will be essential once you become a full berserker. You'll need to dose yourself before battles, achieving that legendary fury that makes berserkers so feared on the battlefield. The psychological effects are cumulative. Each dose leaves permanent changes in your brain chemistry, pathways that can't be undone once they're carved into your neural tissue. You start experiencing episodes where reality becomes fluid, where you can't tell if the blood on your hands is real or imagined, where voices that aren't there give you commands that seem perfectly reasonable to follow. Your sleeping patterns fragment. Normal dreams disappear, replaced by vivid nightmares filled with the sounds of splitting bones and the taste of iron. You wake up with your throat raw from screaming, your fingernails embedded with meat and soil from clawing at the ground in your sleep. The other initiates have learned to give you space during these episodes, not out of kindness, but because you've started lashing out at anyone who comes near. The masters encourage this deterioration. They want your grip on ordinary human consciousness to slip. They need you to become something that can flip a switch in your brain and transform from a thinking person into a killing machine that operates on pure instinct and chemically induced rage. Every meal, every dose, every nightmare is carefully calculated to push you further from your humanity, and you're starting to like it. That's the most terrifying part. Somewhere deep in your changing brain, you're beginning to crave the moments when the mushrooms kick in and the world becomes simple again. No complex thoughts, no moral considerations, no fear of death or consequence. Just the pure animal satisfaction of violence. Learning to be a wolf, 6 months into your training, they finally give you your first real weapon. Not a practice sword or blunted axe, but a seeks, a long iron knife sharp enough to split hairs. The blade is 13 inches of hand-forged steel, its edge honed to surgical sharpness. The handle is wrapped in wolf hide, stained dark with the blood of previous owners. This isn't a gift. It's a tool that will either complete your transformation or kill you in the process. Your first lesson with the Sikhs isn't about technique or form. It's about intimacy with violence. They chain a wild boar to a post in the training yard. Not a domestic pig, but a 300-pound monster with tusks like daggers and the disposition of a cornered demon. Your task is simple. Kill it with your knife, alone, while the other initiates and masters watch from the safety of the lodge walls. The boar charges the moment you step into the yard. You've never moved so fast in your life, but it's not fast enough. Those tusks rake across your ribs, opening 3 parallel gashes that spray blood across the dirt. The pain is immediate and shocking, but there's no time to process it because the boar is wheeling around for another charge. This time you're ready, sort of. You dive to the side, slashing wildly with your Sikhs, managing to open a shallow cut along the animal's flank. For 40 minutes, you and this boar dance a brutal waltz around that yard. Every mistake costs you blood and skin. The boar's tusks pierce your thigh, your shoulder, your forearm. Your Sikhs finds its hide again and again, but never deep enough to end the fight quickly. Both of you are bleeding. Both of you are exhausted. Both of you understand that only one is walking away from this encounter. When you finally manage to drive your blade deep into the boar's neck, severing the artery that sends blood fountaining across your face and chest, something inside you breaks open. Not breaks apart, breaks open, like a chrysalis splitting to release something that was always waiting inside. The taste of blood in your mouth, the weight of the dying animal as it collapses against you, the cheers from the watching berserkers. It all combines into a moment of pure, perfect clarity. This is what you were made for. This is what feels right. The masters make you butcher the boar yourself, teaching you to separate meat from bone with the same Sikhs you used to kill it. They show you how to read the animal's body, how to find the joints where cartilage gives way to blade, how to crack ribs to reach the organs inside. Your hands, already calloused from months of training, learn the texture of fresh viscera, the resistance of different tissues, the way warm blood coagulates between your fingers. But the real lesson comes later, when they bring in a captured thrall, a slave taken in a raid on a coastal settlement. He's bound with rope, gagged with leather, eyes wide with the kind of terror that comes from understanding exactly what's about to happen. The masters explain that combat against animals is just preparation. Real berserkers fight men, and men are infinitely more dangerous than boars. They don't make you kill the thrall, not yet. Instead, they make you practice on him. How to inflict pain without causing death. How to read fear in human eyes. How to use that fear as a weapon more effective than any blade. The thrall becomes your training dummy for techniques that would be impossible to practice on fellow initiates. At least, not without reducing your numbers significantly. You learn the psychology of intimidation, how a berserker's reputation often wins battles before the first blow is struck. The way you hold your weapon, the expression on your face, the sounds you make, all of these become part of your arsenal. The masters teach you the berserker war cry, a sound that emerges from deep in your chest and resonates in a frequency that triggers primal fear responses in everyone who hears it. They explain that berserkers aren't just warriors. They're living psychological weapons designed to break enemy morale. When a line of berserkers charges across a battlefield, howling like wolves and seemingly impervious to pain, most opponents break and run before contact is even made. The few who stand their ground find themselves facing opponents who don't fight like normal men, who don't respond to wounds or fear or reason. Your Sikhs becomes an extension of your body. You sleep with it, eat with it, practice forms with it until the movements become as automatic as breathing. The blade develops nicks and stains that tell the story of your progress. A chip from that first boar fight, dark stains from the training sessions with the thrall, scratches from countless hours of practice against wooden posts and iron shields. By the end of your first year, you can draw and strike in a single motion faster than most men can blink. You can fight effectively with wounds that would incapacitate normal warriors. Most importantly, you can access that berserker fury at will, using a combination of breathing techniques, mental triggers, and chemical enhancement to transform from a thinking person into a killing machine in mere seconds. The sacred mushroom rituals. By your second year of training, the mushroom rituals have become the cornerstone of your transformation into something beyond human. What started as occasional doses to break down your psychological barriers has evolved into a precise science of consciousness manipulation that would terrify modern pharmacologists. The Berserker Masters have spent generations perfecting these techniques, creating combinations of natural psychoactive compounds that can turn a man into a weapon of mythological proportions. The fly agaric mushrooms grow in the deep forests surrounding the lodge. Their distinctive red caps with white spots making them impossible to mistake for anything harmless. But harvesting them is a ritual in itself. You must venture into the woods alone, armed only with your seeks, and spend 3 days living like a wild animal while you search for the perfect specimens. The mushrooms must be picked at dawn, dried according to specific procedures, and prepared with prayers to Odin that would sound like madness to Christian ears. But the fly agaric is just the foundation. The real artistry comes in the combinations. Henbane seeds, ground to powder and mixed with wolf fat. Belladonna berries, fermented in human urine for exactly 9 days. Wild lettuce sap, concentrated through a process that takes weeks and produces a substance so potent that a drop on your tongue can send you into convulsions. Each berserker develops his own personal formula, a unique cocktail of consciousness-altering substances that produces his particular brand of battle fury. The preparation ritual takes place in the lodge's inner sanctum, a circular chamber carved directly into the mountain's living rock. The walls are covered with runic inscriptions that chronicle centuries of berserker knowledge, formulas, techniques, warnings about dosages that have killed initiates who pushed too far. In the center of the room stands a massive iron cauldron, blackened by generations of use, its surface pitted with acid burns from the various compounds that have been mixed within. Your first major ritual comes on the anniversary of your arrival at the lodge. You've survived 12 months of training that has killed 3 other initiates, one from a training accident, one from pushing too hard during a mushroom session, and one who simply walked into the forest one morning and never came back. The masters tell you it's time to meet your fetch, the animal spirit that will become your berserker identity. The dose they give you this time is unlike anything you've experienced before. Instead of the familiar disconnection and mild hallucinations, reality dissolves completely. You're no longer in the stone chamber, but running through an endless forest, where the trees have eyes and the ground beneath your feet feels like living flesh. The boundaries between your body and the world around you don't just blur, they cease to exist entirely. That's when you meet the wolf. Not a real wolf, but something far more primal. The platonic ideal of wolfness, the spirit that embodies everything wild and predatory and free. It speaks to you without words, communicating in images and emotions and raw understanding. It shows you what you could become if you're willing to let go of the last vestiges of your human identity. The wolf explains that becoming a berserker isn't about learning to fight. It's about learning to die. Not physical death, but the death of the civilized self, the part of you that hesitates before violence, that feels guilt after killing, that recognizes other humans as fundamentally similar to yourself. This death is necessary because the berserker state requires a consciousness that operates purely on instinct and rage, unencumbered by moral considerations or fear of consequences. The vision lasts for what feels like days, but is actually only hours. When you finally return to normal consciousness, you find yourself naked in the forest, your body covered in scratches and bite marks, your fingernails broken and embedded with bark and soil. The masters find you at dawn, curled up in the hollow of a massive oak tree, whimpering like a lost animal. They drag you back to the lodge, where you spend the next 3 days in a state of semi-consciousness, occasionally erupting into episodes of violent thrashing that require 4 grown men to restrain. But something fundamental has changed. When you look in the polished bronze mirror they use for weapons maintenance, the eyes that stare back aren't entirely your own anymore. There's something else looking out from behind them. Something that measures every person you see in terms of how easy they would be to kill. The Wolf has taken up residence in your consciousness, and while you still retain your human reasoning most of the time, you can feel it pacing restlessly just beneath the surface, waiting for the right trigger to take control. The Masters are pleased with your progress. They explain that you've successfully completed the first stage of Berserker transformation, the awakening of your animal spirit. Now comes the really difficult part, learning to control it, to channel it effectively in battle, while maintaining enough human consciousness to function as part of a military unit. Too much control, and you remain merely human. Too little, and you become a rabid animal that's as dangerous to your allies as to your enemies. Blood brothers and broken bonds in your 3rd year at the lodge, they finally allow you to train alongside other advanced initiates. These aren't the fresh-faced children who arrived with you. Most of those are dead, broken, or so far gone into madness that they've been quietly released into the wilderness to die like animals. The survivors form a pack of sorts, bound together by shared trauma and the understanding that no one outside this mountain could possibly comprehend what you've become. There's Eric Wolfsbane, who arrived 2 years before you and whose animal spirit is a massive brown bear. During his transformation ritual, he spent 6 days convinced he actually was a bear, walking on all 4s and attempting to hibernate in a cave he dug with his bare hands. The Masters had to drug his food to bring him back to human consciousness, and even now he has episodes where he'll suddenly drop to all 4s and lumber around the training yard, growling at anyone who approaches. Then there's Bjorn Bloodaxe, whose berserker rage manifests as a complete inability to feel pain. During training exercises, he'll fight until his bones are broken and his skin is hanging in strips, never showing any sign of discomfort or fatigue. The Masters use him to demonstrate what happens when the berserker transformation goes too far. He's become so disconnected from his physical body that he's essentially a walking corpse, kept anime only by chemical enhancement and animal fury. Your closest companion is Gunnar Ravensfriend, whose transformation ritual revealed a connection to the Corvid spirits that serve as Odin's messengers. Gunnar can remain conscious and calculating even in the depths of berserker fury, making him invaluable for coordinating attacks and maintaining unit cohesion during battle. But this dual consciousness comes at a cost. He experiences constant auditory hallucinations, hearing the voices of ravens that aren't there, receiving tactical advice from birds that exist only in his chemically altered perception. Together, you form what the Masters call a Berserker Pack, a combat unit designed to function as a single organism during battle. You learn to coordinate your individual madnesses, to recognize the subtle signs that indicate when one of your packmates is about to lose control entirely. Eric's bear spirit makes him an unstoppable force once he builds momentum, but he needs time to build that rage. Bjorn can absorb incredible punishment and keep fighting, but his disconnect from pain means he often doesn't realize when he's been mortally wounded. Gunnar provides tactical awareness, but his raven voices sometimes give him information that proves fatally incorrect. The pack training involves exercises that would be impossible with normal warriors. You learn to fight while one or more of your companions is in a full berserker fury, navigating around their unpredictable movements while maintaining your own combat effectiveness. You practice communication techniques that work even when speech is impossible. Hand signals, body positions, even scent markers that can convey tactical information to packmates, whose consciousness has temporarily reverted to animal levels. But the most important lesson is learning to kill together. The Masters arrange elaborate training scenarios involving captured enemies, complex tactical situations that require coordination between multiple berserkers in various stages of chemical enhancement. You learn to read the rhythms of your packmates' violence, to anticipate their movements and complement their attacks. When Gunnar's ravens tell him to strike high, you instinctively go low. When Eric's bear rage makes him charge straight ahead, you and Bjorn automatically move to flank. These exercises forge bonds deeper than friendship, stronger than family ties. When you fight alongside someone while both of you are in altered states of consciousness, when you trust them to watch your back while you're temporarily insane with rage and chemical enhancement, you create connections that exist on a level below rational thought. Your packmates become extensions of yourself, their heartbeats synchronizing with yours during combat, their breathing patterns matching your own during the pre-battle rituals. But these bonds come with a terrible price. The same psychological conditioning that makes you effective as a unit also makes it nearly impossible to function as individuals in normal society. You can't sleep unless your packmates are nearby. Their absence triggers anxiety attacks that leave you gasping and clawing at your own skin. You can't eat alone. The pack-feeding rituals have become so ingrained that solitary meals feel like betrayal of some fundamental law. Worse, you've all developed a shared psychosis that reinforces your individual madnesses. When Gunnar hears his ravens, the rest of you start hearing them too. When Eric drops into bear consciousness, the whole pack becomes more animalistic, more disconnected from human reasoning. The masters explain that this is intentional. Berserker packs are designed to amplify each other's fury, to create feedback loops of violence that make the unit far more dangerous than the sum of its parts. The pack relationship extends beyond training into every aspect of your daily existence. You share sleeping quarters, meals, even bodily functions. Privacy is a luxury that berserkers cannot afford. You know the sound of each packmate's breathing during sleep, the particular way each one screams during nightmares, the exact texture and smell of their blood from countless training injuries. This intimacy creates its own form of dependency. You literally cannot conceive of existence without your pack. The idea of fighting alone, of making decisions without the input of your packmates' animal spirits, triggers panic responses that can leave you catatonic for hours. The masters have created warriors who are devastatingly effective as a group, but utterly helpless as individuals. The art of sacred violence. By your 4th year, the masters begin teaching you the most closely guarded secrets of berserker warfare, the sacred techniques that transform ordinary combat into religious experience. These aren't just fighting moves. They're ritualized forms of worship that honor Odin through the precise application of violence. Every cut, every thrust, every killing blow becomes an offering to the All-Father, performed with the same reverence that Christian monks reserve for their prayers. The foundation of berserker combat philosophy is the concept of Einherjar, the chosen slain, who will fight alongside Odin during Ragnarok. Every enemy you kill in battle becomes a potential recruit for this final army, but only if they die in the proper manner. This means you can't simply butcher opponents like animals. You must kill them with skill, honor, and the correct ritual observances. A berserker who kills carelessly or without proper technique is worse than useless. He's actively working against the god's purpose. Your first lesson in sacred violence involves learning the 17 different death strikes, each dedicated to a specific aspect of Odin's nature. The raven's kiss targets the throat, severing the carotid artery while allowing the victim to remain conscious long enough to offer prayers to the gods. The Wolf's embrace involves a precise thrust between the ribs that pierces the heart, while leaving the victim's face unmarked. Important because the Einherjar must be recognizable when they reach Valhalla. But technical skill is only half the equation. The other half involves achieving the proper spiritual state while fighting. This requires a delicate balance between berserker fury and conscious control. You must be savage enough to terrify your enemies and relentless enough to overwhelm their defenses, while maintaining sufficient awareness to perform the ritual aspects correctly. Too much fury, and you become a mindless killing machine. Too little, and you're just another warrior with delusions of grandeur. The masters teach you to recognize the signs of divine approval during combat. When you're fighting in accordance with Odin's will, your perception becomes supernaturally acute. You can see your opponent's intentions in their micro-expressions, predict their movements from subtle shifts in body weight, even sense attacks coming from outside your field of vision. Some berserkers report actually seeing the ravens that will carry their victims' souls to Valhalla, circling overhead during particularly sacred battles. Your weapons themselves become sacred objects through ritual consecration. Your Sikhs must be blessed with your own blood, carved with runic inscriptions that invoke Odin's protection, and wrapped with leather strips taken from animals you've killed with your bare hands. The blade becomes so attuned to your spiritual essence that other warriors cannot effectively wield it. The weapon literally refuses to cut properly in foreign hands, as if it recognizes only your touch. The pre-battle rituals grow increasingly complex as you advance in training. What started as simple mushroom ingestion has evolved into elaborate ceremonies involving blood sacrifice, runic casting, and communion with your animal spirit. You learn to read omens in the flight patterns of birds, the behavior of forest animals, even the way shadows fall across the training yard. These signs determine everything from your tactical approach to the specific combinations of chemical enhancement you'll use. Combat itself becomes a form of ecstatic religious experience. When everything aligns properly, the right chemical state, the correct spiritual preparation, the proper tactical situation, fighting transcends mere physical activity and becomes direct communication with the divine. You're no longer simply wielding weapons. You're channeling the destructive aspect of Odin himself, serving as a conduit for divine wrath against the enemies of the gods. The aftermath of sacred combat is equally ritualized. You must collect trophies from worthy opponents, not random body parts, but specific items that represent their martial prowess. A skilled warrior's sword hand, cut off at the wrist and preserved with salt and herbs. The heart of a particularly courageous enemy, removed while still warm and consumed raw as an offering. These trophies aren't just proof of your victories. They're sacred relics that strengthen your connection to the warrior god who guides your blade. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of sacred violence is how it changes your relationship with death itself. After years of killing in Odin's name, of viewing every combat as potential recruitment for the Einherjar, you begin to see death not as an ending, but as a transformation. Every person you kill becomes part of your spiritual army, bound to you by the sacred nature of their demise. You start hearing their voices during meditation, receiving tactical advice from the spirits of your victims, building a supernatural network of intelligence that spans the boundary between life and death. This spiritual dimension adds layers of meaning to every aspect of berserker existence. You're not just warriors. You're priests of a violent god, conducting religious services with sword and axe instead of prayer and incense. Your berserker fury isn't madness. It's divine possession, allowing Odin to fight through your body while your human consciousness takes a temporary back seat. The chemical enhancement isn't drug abuse. It's sacramental consumption, partaking of substances that thin the veil between human and divine consciousness. The wolf's hunger never dies. 5 years into your transformation, you experience your first taste of real combat. When the lodge is attacked by a rival berserker cult that worships Fenrir instead of Odin. These wolf brothers have different techniques, different rituals, and most importantly, a fundamentally different relationship with violence. Where your training has focused on controlled fury channeled through sacred ritual, theirs embraces pure, unrestrained savagery that recognizes no limits and honors no gods. The attack comes at dawn, when most of the lodge is still recovering from the previous night's ritual mushroom consumption. You wake to the sound of splintering wood and dying screams. Your packmates are already moving with the fluid coordination of a unit that has trained together for years. But something is wrong. Your chemical enhancement protocols were designed for planned battles with proper preparation time, not sudden defensive actions when you're still half-conscious and disoriented. Eric Wolfsbane is the first to engage the attackers, his bear spirit roaring to life as he crashes through the lodge's main door wielding nothing but a woodsman's axe and his bare hands. But these aren't ordinary raiders. They move with the same enhanced speed and strength that mark true berserkers. And their Wolfhowl battle cries trigger, something primal in your own animal spirit that makes coherent thought nearly impossible. The enemy berserkers fight differently than anything you've trained against. They don't use weapons in the traditional sense. Instead, they've modified their own bodies into living weapons. Their teeth have been filed to points and reinforced with iron caps. Their fingernails have been replaced with curved metal claws that can tear through leather and flesh with equal ease. Most disturbing of all, they seem to feel no pain whatsoever. Wounds that would drop normal men barely slow them down. Your first kill in real combat is nothing like the training scenarios. The wolf brother who comes for you is completely naked, his body covered in ritual scars and tattoos that seem to writhe in the flickering firelight. When your Sikhs opens his throat, instead of falling, he grabs your wrist and pulls you closer, trying to bite your face even as his lifeblood pumps out between his fingers. You have to stab him 7 more times before he finally releases his grip and collapses. The taste of his blood on your lips, sprayed there by his severed artery, triggers something in your berserker conditioning that you've never experienced before. The chemical enhancement you ingested last night suddenly resurfaces with overwhelming intensity, combining with the adrenaline of real combat to produce a state of consciousness that exists somewhere beyond human experience. You're still aware of yourself, still capable of tactical thinking, but underneath that awareness, something else has awakened, something that views every living thing around you as either prey or rival predator. Gunnar Raven's friend takes a claw strike across his back that opens him from shoulder blade to spine. But his raven voices are screaming tactical information faster than normal speech could convey. He points toward the lodge's weapon storage, where 3 wolf brothers are trying to steal the sacred arms that took decades to forge and consecrate. Without conscious decision, your pack moves as a single organism, flowing around obstacles and enemies with fluid precision that would be impossible for normal warriors to achieve. The battle itself lasts less than 20 minutes, but it feels like hours. Time dilates and contracts in ways that defy rational explanation. You experience individual sword strokes as extended sequences, seeing every detail of blade meeting flesh in crystalline clarity, while entire tactical maneuvers compress into single moments of pure action. By the time the last wolf brother falls, you've killed 4 men and injured 3 others, but you have no memory of specific techniques or conscious decisions. Your body moved according to training so deeply ingrained that it operates independently of thought. The aftermath is worse than the fighting. As your chemical enhancement begins to fade, you become aware of what you've done. Not just the killing, which was necessary and justified, but the way you killed. One of your victims has been torn apart so savagely that his own mother wouldn't recognize the remains. Another lies with his chest cavity opened and his heart missing. Apparently, you ate it while he was still alive, though you have no memory of this action. Bjorn Bloodaxe didn't survive the battle, not because he was killed. His body shows at least 30 wounds, any one of which should have been fatal. But he kept fighting until his blood pressure dropped too low to maintain consciousness. He died not from enemy action, but from his own inability to recognize when he was mortally wounded. The masters find his body still gripping his axe, surrounded by the corpses of 6 wolf brothers who continued attacking him even after he was technically dead. The victory celebration that night involves rituals that would terrify normal humans. You consume the hearts of the enemy berserkers, believing that this will grant you their strength and knowledge. The blood of your fallen opponents is mixed with sacred mushrooms to create a communion, wine that produces visions of the battle from the perspective of the dead. Most disturbing of all, you find yourself mourning Born not as a lost friend, but as a packmate whose absence reduces your combat effectiveness. This battle teaches you fundamental truths about Berserker existence that no amount of training could convey. First, that the line between Berserker and monster is far thinner than you believed. Under sufficient stress, the sacred warrior becomes indistinguishable from a rabid animal. Second, that your pack bonds are literally stronger than individual survival instincts. You would die to protect packmates without conscious decision, and their deaths wound you more deeply than physical injury. Third, that real combat changes you in ways that can never be undone. Every kill leaves permanent alterations in your brain chemistry, building toward a critical mass of violence that will eventually consume your human identity entirely. The price of the bear's strength after Bjorn's death and replacement by a new packmate, Hakon Ravenclaw, whose animal spirit manifests as a massive black wolf. Your training enters its final phase. The masters explain that you've survived long enough to learn the ultimate berserker techniques, the secrets that separate true champions of Odin from ordinary madmen with weapons. But these techniques come with prices that would horrify anyone who still retained normal human morality. The first secret involves learning to extend your berserker fury beyond the normal chemical duration. Through a combination of meditation techniques, pain conditioning, and ritual scarification, you can maintain your enhanced state for hours instead of minutes. But this extended fury requires fuel, specifically, fresh human blood consumed during combat. Not sipped from a cup like wine, but bitten directly from the throats of your enemies while they're still alive and struggling. Your first lesson in blood drinking takes place during a raid on a monastery near the coast. These Christian monks have accumulated significant wealth through their trading activities, making them attractive targets for normal Vikings. But for berserkers, they serve a different purpose. Their pacifist beliefs and lack of combat training make them ideal subjects for practicing techniques that would be too dangerous to test on fellow warriors. The abbot who leads the monastery is a thin, scholarly man in his 60s who trembles when he sees your pack approaching. He offers no resistance when you grab him by the throat and bite down on his carotid artery. But the taste of his blood triggers an immediate and overwhelming transformation in your consciousness. The usual berserker fury pales in comparison to this new state. You become something that exists purely to consume life force, to drain the vitality from every living thing within reach. Brother Marcus, a young monk who tries to defend his abbot, becomes your second victim. But instead of simply killing him, you find yourself prolonging his death, drinking from multiple wounds while he weakens slowly. Each swallow of blood extends your enhanced state, pushing your physical capabilities beyond anything you've previously experienced. Your strength doubles, then triples. Your speed increases until you're moving faster than normal eyes can track. Most importantly, your endurance becomes nearly infinite. You could fight for days without rest as long as fresh blood remains available. The other monks flee screaming into the forest, and hunting them becomes a game that teaches you advanced berserker tactics. Hakon's wolf spirit makes him supernaturally gifted at tracking, following scent trails that are invisible to normal humans. Eric's bear rage allows him to crash through undergrowth that would stop ordinary men, pursuing victims who think they've found safety in dense thickets. Gunnar's ravens provide aerial surveillance, guiding the pack toward prey that has gone to ground. When you finally corner the last group of monks in a cave system that tunnels deep into the mountainside, the real lesson begins. The masters have followed your hunt, and now they demonstrate techniques that transform enclosed space combat into an art form. In the narrow tunnels, conventional weapons become liabilities, but berserker natural weapons, teeth, claws, raw physical strength, provide significant advantages. You learn to use the cave walls themselves as weapons, slamming opponents against stone with enough force to shatter bones. The acoustic properties of the tunnels amplify your berserker, howls into weapons of psychological warfare that can literally drive men insane with terror. Most importantly, you discover that in complete darkness, your chemically enhanced senses provide overwhelming tactical advantages over normal humans who depend primarily on vision. The final monk, a boy no older than 15, provides your introduction to a berserker technique so disturbing that even the masters warn you about its psychological consequences. By consuming his blood while he's still alive and conscious, by maintaining eye contact during the feeding, you can absorb not just his life force, but aspects of his memories and personality. For several hours after his death, you retain fragments of his knowledge, his ability to read Latin, his memories of growing up in a farming village, even his theological understanding of Christian doctrine. This memory absorption proves tactically valuable in subsequent raids, allowing berserker packs to gather intelligence about enemy settlements, defensive preparations, and hidden treasure locations. But it also begins eroding the boundaries of your individual identity. When you retain memories from dozens of different people, when you can recall experiences that happened to other minds in other bodies, the question of who you actually are becomes increasingly difficult to answer. The blood drinking also produces physical changes that mark you permanently as something beyond human. Your canine teeth elongate and sharpen, becoming more like fangs than normal human dentition. Your jaw muscles strengthen to provide the crushing force necessary to bite through human necks. Most disturbing of all, you develop an addiction to human blood that grows stronger with each feeding. Animal blood can sustain your enhanced states, but it lacks the psychological impact that makes human vitality so intoxicating. By the end of your 6th year, you've participated in 17 raids and consumed the blood of over 40 victims. Each feeding has left permanent changes in your brain chemistry, alterations that push you further from normal human consciousness. You no longer dream normal dreams. Instead, your sleep is filled with fragments of memories stolen from the dead, nightmares that aren't actually yours, and visions of battles fought by men whose blood you've tasted. The masters explain that you're approaching the final threshold of berserker transformation. Soon, you'll face the ultimate test, a solo mission that will either complete your evolution into a true champion of Odin or destroy what remains of your human identity. Either outcome serves the god's purpose, but only one allows you to continue existing as an individual consciousness rather than a fragment of divine. While given temporary flesh, the Raven's final message. Your 7th year begins with the most ominous sign possible. Gunnar Raven's friend stops hearing his spirit birds. For 3 years, his raven voices have provided tactical intelligence that kept your pack alive through dozens of encounters. Now, in the middle of what should have been a routine training exercise, he suddenly freezes mid-combat and announces that the ravens have gone silent. This isn't just concerning. For a berserker whose entire identity revolves around communion with corvid spirits, it's a death sentence. The masters explain that Gunnar has reached what they call the final threshold, the point where a berserker's human consciousness becomes so damaged by chemical enhancement and psychological conditioning that his animal spirit abandons him. Without his ravens, Gunnar is no longer a berserker. He's just a chemically dependent madman with combat training. But the masters won't simply retire him or allow him to leave the lodge. Berserkers who lose their animal spirits become unpredictable in ways that threaten the entire program's security. The solution is as brutal as it is practical. Gunnar must die, but his death must serve a purpose that honors his years of service to Odin. The masters arrange a ritual combat, where you and your remaining packmates will fight Gunnar to the death, with the winner earning the right to consume his heart and absorb his accumulated battle experience. It's presented as an honor, a chance for Gunnar to contribute to his packmate's development, even after his own transformation has failed. But you know better. This isn't honor. It's a demonstration designed to show you exactly what happens to berserkers who can no longer fulfill their function. You're not just killing a friend. You're eliminating a liability while providing a practical lesson about the consequences of psychological breakdown. The masters watch with clinical interest as you prepare weapons and tactics for fighting. Someone who knows all your strengths and weaknesses as intimately as you know his. The combat takes place in the lodge's main hall, with all the surviving initiates forced to watch. Gunnar fights like a man who has nothing left to lose, wielding his seeks with the desperate skill of someone who understands that defeat means not just death, but the complete erasure of everything he's become. But without his raven voices providing tactical information, he's reduced to purely human reflexes and intuition. Still formidable, but no longer supernatural. Eric Wolfsbane lands the killing blow, his bare spirit-enhanced strength driving an axe through Gunnar's ribcage with enough force to pin him to the wooden floor. But Gunnar doesn't die immediately. Instead, he spends his last minutes explaining what it feels like to lose your animal spirit. The sudden silence where voices used to be. The crushing realization that you're trapped forever in purely human consciousness. The understanding that everything you've sacrificed to become a berserker has been for nothing. The ritual consumption of Gunnar's heart takes place immediately after his death. While his blood is still warm and his battle memories remain accessible, the masters prepare his heart according to ancient recipes, mixing it with sacred mushrooms and fermented honey to create a communion meal that will transfer his accumulated experience to his surviving packmates. You eat your portion while trying not to think about the hundreds of conversations you've had with the man whose flesh now sits in your stomach. The memory absorption is immediate and overwhelming. Suddenly, you have access to Gunnar's recollections of every battle he's fought, every technique he's mastered, every tactical insight his raven spirits provided over the years. But you also inherit his psychological damage, the voices that drove him increasingly mad, the paranoid delusions that made him see enemies in every shadow, the growing disconnection from human emotion that left him unable to form normal relationships. More disturbing is the realization that Gunnar's fate awaits every berserker eventually. The chemical enhancement, psychological conditioning, and spiritual transformation that create berserker capabilities also inevitably destroy the human consciousness that houses them. Some berserkers burn out after 5 years, others last decades, but none survive indefinitely with their sanity intact. You're not becoming immortal champions of Auden. You're becoming temporary weapons that will eventually self-destruct when the damage becomes too extensive. Your pack, now reduced to 3 members, receives a replacement, Thorfinn Bloodhawk, whose animal spirit manifests as a hunting falcon. But Thorfinn is different from previous packmates. He's older, having survived 9 years of berserker training, and his animal spirit has evolved beyond simple enhancement into something approaching genuine supernatural ability. When his falcon spirit takes control, Thorfinn can literally fly short distances, his body becoming so light that he can leap 50 feet horizontally or drop from great heights without injury. Training with Thorfinn teaches you advanced aerial tactics that most berserkers never learn. He can provide reconnaissance from positions that would be impossible for ground-based warriors, dropping onto enemies from above with devastating surprise attacks. But his advanced abilities come with corresponding psychological damage. Thorfinn spends most of his time convinced that he actually is a bird, attempting to build nests in high places and becoming violently agitated when forced to remain on the ground for extended periods. The masters use Thorfinn as an example of successful long-term berserker development, but you can see the truth they're trying to hide. Thorfinn isn't successful. He's a cautionary tale about what happens when the transformation process goes too far. His supernatural abilities are impressive, but they've cost him almost everything that could be considered human. He communicates primarily through bird-like sounds, shows no interest in normal social interaction, and treats other pack members as rivals competing for territory rather than companions. As your 7th year progresses, you begin experiencing symptoms that mirror Gunnar's final decline. Your own animal spirit, the wolf that has guided you through years of violence and transformation, starts becoming less responsive during crucial moments. Sometimes you call for its power and receive nothing but silence. Other times it manifests too strongly, taking control of your body for hours while your human consciousness becomes a helpless passenger. The masters watch your deterioration with the same clinical interest they showed during Gunnar's breakdown. They're not concerned with your well-being as an individual. You're a test subject in an experiment that spans generations, designed to push the boundaries of human consciousness as far as possible before inevitable collapse. Your success or failure will inform the training of future berserkers, but your personal survival is irrelevant to their larger goals. The Wolf's last hunt, your final year at the lodge, begins with the masters announcing your ultimate test. A solo mission deep into enemy territory that will either prove your worthiness as a complete berserker or eliminate you as a failed experiment. The target is a fortified settlement 3 days' journey to the south, where a rival Jarl has been building an army that threatens territories under Odin's protection. Your mission isn't just to kill this leader. You must do it alone, without support from your pack, using only the skills and enhancements you've developed over 8 years of brutal conditioning. The settlement is protected by walls 10 feet high and guards who have been warned to watch for berserker infiltration. Normal assault tactics would require a full warband of 30 or 40 warriors, but berserkers operate according to different principles. Your approach must rely on stealth, psychological warfare, and the supernatural abilities that distinguish true berserkers from ordinary madmen with weapons. Failure means not just death, but the knowledge that everything you've endured has been for nothing. You spend 3 days in the forest surrounding the target, observing guard rotations and identifying weaknesses in their defenses. The chemical enhancement you've consumed for this mission is different from previous formulations. Stronger, more sustained, but also more dangerous. The masters have warned you that this particular combination has never been tested for longer than 12 hours. And that extending beyond that time frame could cause permanent brain damage or cardiac failure. The attack begins at midnight during the new moon, when darkness provides maximum advantage for your enhanced senses. You scale the settlement's walls using berserker techniques that would be impossible for normal humans. Your chemically enhanced strength allows you to climb straight up wooden surfaces using only your fingertips, while your animal spirit guides you to handholds that remain invisible to ordinary perception. The first guard dies before he realizes anything is wrong. Your Seeks opens his throat while he's still looking the other way, and you catch his body to prevent noise that might alert his companions. But killing him triggers something unexpected. Instead of simply dying, his blood seems to call to your animal spirit in ways that previous kills never have. When you drink from his wound, the enhancement effect is so powerful, the reality begins shifting into something beyond normal human experience. Suddenly, you can see in perfect detail, despite the absolute darkness. Your hearing becomes so acute that you can distinguish individual heartbeats from different buildings throughout the settlement. Most disturbing of all, you begin sensing the emotional states of sleeping people, their dreams, their fears, their unconscious awareness that death has entered their community. This supernatural perception is intoxicating, but it's also overwhelming your ability to maintain coherent thought. The Jarl's longhouse sits in the center of the settlement, protected by his personal guards and his reputation as a warrior who has never lost single combat. But when you slip through his door like smoke, you discover that reputation means nothing against opponents who no longer operate according to human limitations. He wakes to find you crouched over his sleeping form, your fangs already at his throat, your animal spirit howling with triumph at the prospect of consuming such a powerful adversary. But something goes wrong during the kill. Instead of simply draining his blood, you find yourself absorbing far more of his essence than ever before. His memories flood into your consciousness, not just recent events, but decades of experiences, relationships, decisions, and dreams. For several minutes after his death, you literally become him, seeing through his eyes, feeling his emotions, understanding his motivations with perfect clarity. This total identity absorption is so overwhelming that you lose track of your own memories temporarily. You remember growing up as the Jarl's son, learning swordplay from his father's weapon master, falling in love with a woman whose name was Astrid, leading successful raids against rival settlements. These aren't your experiences, but they feel completely real, completely authentic, as if you've lived multiple lives simultaneously. When your original consciousness finally reasserts itself, you discover that something fundamental has changed. The Jarl's personality hasn't disappeared after absorption. It's become permanently integrated into your own identity. You now have access to his tactical knowledge, his political connections, his understanding of regional power structures. But you also carry his emotional attachments, his personal loyalties, his individual quirks and preferences. The return journey to the lodge becomes a nightmare of shifting identities and conflicting memories. Sometimes you remember being trained as a berserker. Other times you recall growing up as the Jarl's heir. Your animal spirit seems confused by these additional personalities, sometimes responding to commands given by voices that aren't originally yours. By the time you reach the lodge, you're no longer entirely certain which set of memories represents your true identity. The masters are fascinated by your condition, but not surprised. They explain that total identity absorption is the final stage of berserker evolution, the point where individual human consciousness dissolves entirely, replaced by a collective identity that incorporates every person you've ever killed. This isn't madness. It's transcendence, the ultimate communion with Odin's wisdom that comes from literally experiencing death from both sides of the blade. You've succeeded in your mission, but success has cost you the last vestiges of individual identity. You're no longer the frightened 12-year-old who arrived at the lodge 8 years ago, or even the enhanced warrior who departed on this mission. You've become something unprecedented, a living repository of accumulated human experience, a walking library of memories stolen from the dead, a consciousness that exists simultaneously as predator and prey, killer and victim. The masters inform you that your training is complete. You've achieved the highest level of berserker transformation, becoming a true champion of Odin who can serve the god's purposes across multiple lifetimes of accumulated experience. But they also explain that your usefulness as an individual warrior is essentially over. You've become too valuable, too rare, too psychologically complex to risk in ordinary combat. Instead, you'll remain at the lodge as a living teaching tool, your multiple personalities providing insight into enemy psychology, your accumulated memories serving as tactical intelligence for future operations. You'll train new initiates, sharing techniques learned through 8 years of systematic dehumanization. You'll guide other berserkers through the same transformation that has left you simultaneously everything and nothing. And sometimes late at night when the mountain wind howls through the lodge's timber walls, you'll remember what it felt like to be human. You'll recall the face of your original mother, the taste of normal food, the simple pleasure of sleeping without nightmares. These memories feel like stories told by someone else about a person you might have been in another life. If you'd made different choices, if you'd been born in a different time, but those moments of nostalgia pass quickly. You have work to do, initiates to train, traditions to preserve. Somewhere in the valleys below, new children are being selected for transformation. Soon they'll arrive at the lodge, frightened and innocent, carrying within them the potential to become something beyond human imagination. You'll be waiting for them, ready to begin the process all over again.